Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Purple Daily on Draft every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Declan Goff, Miles Gorham, Tyler Fornes here, where we break things down from a draft perspective every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. So hit the subscribe button for Daily Vikings Entertainment. Of course, we have our flagship show with Mackie, Judd, and myself. We bring on Alex Boone. We bring on Tyler Fornes. We bring on Miles for Purple Daily on Draft. We bring on Chip Scoggins and Fornes for Purple Access, Vikings Vent Line, of course, after every Vikings game, and also an off-season edition. So plenty of great Vikings content right here on Purple Daily. So we're going to get into some Jaren Hall conversation. I know, spoiler alert. We're getting into some Jaren Hall conversation, something we always like to talk about on this show. Forno watched some JJ McCarthy tape that we're going to get into also. And plus, I have a mock draft that I'm very excited to spring on you guys that I found here as well. So hit us up, Purple Daily on Draft, in the comment section. You can also hit us up on the feedback tab of the Score North app too. It's a central hub for everything we do, and you can just kind of shoot me a message. I have some stockpiled too, some just feedback questions that we can kind of answer that are very evergreen. So if you want those answered, hit us up on the feedback app or, of course, in the YouTube comments section. All right, boys. So Nick Mullens got the start against the Bengals, and honestly, I think 30,000-foot view, he did pretty well, did pretty admirably. But Forno called it the Case Keenum bozo gene before we hit the mics. He had 3 Case Keenum bozo gene plays that kind of have this murky muck all over himself after the game, despite 9 yards attempt, a few touchdowns, over 200-plus passing yards. Looked, honestly, pretty good outside of the 2 murky plays. But here's what I want to ask you. I guess, Forno, I'll start with you. What would it take for Jaren Hall to get a look-see here? Like, if Mullens throws that pick 6, you said, no, he doesn't get benched, he remains in the game. I think I tend to agree with you, but I think it might be up for discussion with KOC. But clearly, he still likes Nick Mullens. Jeremy Fowler had the report on Monday morning that they're still going to stick with Nick Mullens as the starter against the Lions. What do you think it would take, I guess black and white-wise, to see Jaren Hall get a look at quarterback for the Vikings before the end of the season?
I just want to preface this with, I am probably the biggest Jaren Hall fan of anybody that is not blood relative. It would take Nick Mullens breaking his leg or the Vikings either fully securing a playoff spot where nothing can change, or they're completely out of the mix, which I don't know if they can be mathematically eliminated before week 18. So I really think it's going to be, everything's all set in stone. They're going to be like, say, the 6th seed, and that's set in stone week 18. And there's really nothing you can gain or lose from playing, or Nick Mullens has a season-ending injury, because right now Mullens did enough really good things on Saturday to maintain his position as a starting quarterback. And the really tough part is you can't necessarily judge these 3 quarterbacks like you would judge Kirk Cousins, in the fact that they're not starters. They are backups. You are going to have bad plays from these guys. It's just a fact. Like, you're going to have these bozo gene moments. And it's about what can you do outside of those moments to help you continue to win. Obviously, you don't want to have those 3 bozo gene moments. You just don't. You want to eliminate them. But there's also a reason why Nick Mullens is on a 2-year, $4 million contract. He does a lot of good things, but he has a lot of like, dude, what are you doing? That's why he's not a starting quarterback in the National Football League. And right now, the Vikings are in a position where they don't have a starting quarterback on their active roster. Now, could they have one in Jaren Hall? Maybe. But right now, with the culture the Vikings have instilled, they're trying to win football games now. And they believe that Nick Mullens gives them the best opportunity to win them now. And quite frankly, I agree. I think Hall has more upside, more of a future potentially than Nick Mullens does. And I think he could be a better backup quarterback, probably even next year, maybe. But at this moment, with the Vikings in a playoff push, it's Nick Mullens. And he did a lot of really good things, throwing timing routes to the outside, hitting digs across the middle, not Stephon Diggs, dig routes, and doing some of those things. It's really nice to see. And that was what was lacking with Josh Dobbs. Now, you can't throw that interception to Mike Hilton. You just have to take the sack and not throw it, that literally 2-foot interception to BJ Hill, and that screen pass that was too telegraphed, and they made it too easy for Pratt to be able to jump it. But luckily, they got bailed out the offsides call. And then what does he do? He takes advantage and drives him down for a Jordan Addison touchdown, which that touchdown pass was arguably a Bozo Gene moment, where like the top quarterbacks in the National Football League would get praised. Oh, he trusted his guy. He found him, even though it was across his body into traffic in the red zone. That's something you can't do as a quarterback, but it worked. And you have to be able to clean some of that up. but the good was really good. And that's where you talk about process versus execution. Mullens exuded good process throughout the majority of the game, gave the Vikings a chance to win. And then you had the offensive line, and you could argue a little bit, and Dan Orlovsky broke it down yesterday on Twitter. Like, they kind of telegraphed the quarterback sneak and made it a little more difficult for the offensive line to be able to kind of protect there. But you have to be able to execute getting 2 feet. You have to be able to do that. They did it earlier in the game. So like calling it back to back was fine because they had already shown they could be successful with it. But it's the process with Mullens is mostly good. It's about as good as you can expect from a backup quarterback who has really no ceiling as a starter. And we're playing with house money. Like, would I love to see Hall start? Hell yeah. I'd love to see Hall start. I was probably the most excited to see him start against the Falcons and the most devastated to see him get the concussion. But where you're at right now, it's the Mullens show. And unless he breaks a leg, which we don't hope he breaks a leg, you're probably not going to see Jaren Hall.
Miles, do you tend to agree that it's probably going to be injury more than performance-related issues that get Nick Mullens benched in favor of Jaren Hall? Is there a situation where, like, the offense has had some clunkers, right? I know with Josh Dobbs and whatnot, they've had some clunkers against Chicago. They had a clunker against Denver, obviously the Vegas game too. And I know those are different quarterbacks, different situations, but if a similar situation arises where this offense just goes silent against Detroit, and then, yeah, you're not out of the playoffs with a loss to the Lions on Sunday, but is there any way you see that a QB change happening, or is it mostly just still injury related like Forno's talking about?
Yeah, I still don't view Hall as the guy that they want to go to in any circumstance, unless we're mathematically out of the playoffs. I don't, because otherwise, if Josh Dobbs was the immediate backup right now, I'd say there's probably a shorter leash on Mullens. But because Jaren Hall is the backup and Dobbs is the emergency third quarterback, I think that gives Nick Mullens a little bit of a longer leash. They know what he can do. They know he has a full command of the offense. Now, obviously, we saw a lot of the boneheaded plays that we on Saturday. It was bad. It was like we saw a lot of what we saw from Dobbs, just in a different style of offense. Now, Mullens fits the Kevin O'Connell offense better than Dobbs does. So I think that's why you saw them move the ball a little bit better. You saw them be a little bit more consistent, especially in the timing routes. But some of the boneheaded plays, some of the turnover-worthy plays were just as bad as what we saw from Dobbs, maybe even some worse. Like Mike Hilton almost had a pick six where Nick Mullens threw it right to him and missed JJ. Obviously threw that pick to Mullen or to Hilton later, threw another one to that pick six that got called back. There's a lot of those things that happened on Saturday that could have changed the complete outcome of the game. Now, obviously, you can flip that around, and if he doesn't have those issues, then maybe the Vikings win that football game. But you can't have those mistakes in the red zone, especially. You can't expect him to be perfect. I think that, like Forno said, there's a lot of really good that happened. You saw that he had a lot of really good chemistry with guys like Jordan Addison. Finally got JJ back going. JJ looked really good. But I thought Addison just looked like we saw what that like trio could really be. And I think, and obviously that's even like the lower level of the upside because of the quarterback position. But I think you saw that like Addison can be the 1A guy one week if he needs to be because of all the attention to JJ and vice versa. So it's really good to see that Addison still like developing and continuing to ball out the way he did on Saturday. But from like a perspective of benching Nick Mullens, I just don't see it happening unless it was like a Raiders game last week. And I'm talking about the Raiders versus Chargers game, where it's like 42-0 at halftime. Some crazy, right? Like, otherwise, I just don't see it happening because I just think they feel that Mullens has the best command and best opportunity to like run the offense efficiently, and in a guy that can get the ball to the playmakers on time and for the most part accurate. And so I think his command of the offense is the best probably of the three quarterbacks. And I just don't see a need while you're in the playoff race to make that change unless, like I said, unless something drastic happens.
So do you guys also think that is this solidifying, and again, we're early, but is this solidifying the fact they obviously miss Kirk? I think we all know that, but they would bring back Kirk Cousins? Like, I don't think
it doesn't mean anything right now. I think the whole conversation about Kirk Cousins is going to come down to two things. And we already know that they want the person back in the building. Kevin O'Connell has said that ad nauseum, but it's about how does that injury heal and where is that going to be at? Because it's going to really impact arm strength because you generate a lot of power from your lower half, and the Achilles tendon, you generate a lot of power like with that area of your body. And if that's not like fully healed, and a lot of times it takes 2 years for that to heal. Just like look at Cam Akers. He didn't really start coming on until 2 years after that injury occurred. And Kirk Cousins is going to be 36. He's not going to be 23 years old. Like that's going to play into this conversation. And the other part's going to be money. What does he want for a contract? They already didn't agree on one months ago, back in March. So what is going to change now? How are those conversations going to be different? Do the Vikings view him significantly less because of the injury? And it has nothing to do with his play this year. It's about how are we going to project forward? Because that injury could debilitate his career. It could also mean nothing, and it could be somewhere in between. So answering those questions is going to be huge to kind of figure out if he's going to come back. Plus, what if the Falcons go after him? That's a team that desperately needs a quarterback because let's just be honest. Desmond Ridder stinks. He's really bad at football.
So does their head coach.
Oh, yeah. But if he gets his Ryan Tannehill, which Kirk Cousins gets a lot of comparisons to, then you might be able to actually take that offense and make it something that's plausible because that's how he got the job in Atlanta in the first place. So I think the outside market is going to play a factor too, because maybe Cousins wants to hit it again. And he might just be like, you know what? All the offers are comparable. I just want to stay here. Like there are so many variables that we have to consider, but they obviously want the person back. But as far as the player, a lot of questions. I don't think anything with these next few weeks other than Nick Mullens decides to look like an all-pro or Jaren Hall is that guy, which I don't think either of those are happening by the end of the season. I don't think anything that we'll see is going to impact those negotiations.
Here's another sneaky one for you guys. What about Tampa Bay? They have the most cap space in the NFL next year. Are they going to draft someone?
Did you not see what Baker just did to the Packers?
Hey, I like what Baker did. But
He's the first visiting quarterback to ever have a perfect passer rating at Lambeau Field.
He looked good yesterday.
Lights out.
He did look good. Really good. Packer fans will tell you Joe Barry was the fault, and shout out to Cheesehead TV for a glorious social media clip that we played earlier. Love me some Aaron Nagler, so I can't even dog on him too much. But yeah, I mean, there are other suitors too for him. Yeah, Atlanta could be a big option. If another one of these big spending teams in free agency wants to do that, they can do it too. It's just
that's where timing's important there, right, Declan? Mm-hmm. Like if the Vikings are going to have to make that decision before the free agency window opens up, because if they don't, then Kirk's agent, because we know by the time they get to the combine, that agents are having conversations with other teams and those things and having they're basically having those fake conversations like. They're not real. They're not legitimate, but they're having those sneaky behind the scenes conversations of hey, what hypothetically would it look like if you wanted to sign my player, in this case Kirk Cousins. And so they're going to have a really good gauge. The Kirk Cousins and his agent are going to have a really good gauge of where things stand by the end of the combine and just ahead of free agency. And I think the Vikings themselves are going to have to make that decision a lot earlier than they probably would even like to. But the benefit the Vikings have is they have the book on his surgery situation, on his recovery. So they have a little bit more understanding of what that could look like. But at the same time, I think the one thing that this is kind of a side tangent, but all we hear right now is what if with Kirk Cousins. And I know he's hurt. And so I'm very empathetic to the idea that he's hurt and the Vikings could be having 8 or 9 wins right now instead of 7-7. But I think I'm the part with the Kirk Cousins whole scenario over the last 6 years is all we've done every year is what if every scenario with him and the team.
Totally.
And I think I'm just over that aspect of it in the sense that I know if Kirk Cousins was healthy, this team would probably be better. Nobody's questioning that.
Right.
But all we ever get to do is play the what if game. It's always the what if this, what if that, what if the right guard was better? What if this guy didn't get hurt? What if JJ's, doesn't get hurt? All these small, not small things, but all these things always factor in this what if scenario. And at the end of the day, we're still a mediocre, middling team that either will barely make the playoffs or will just miss it. And I don't know, that part I think I'm just over. So I hate this idea that you have to bring Kirk back because of what we did this year, because that might not impact. We might be worse next year than we were this year, based off of a lot of variables that happen. You look at the edge rusher position on our team right now heading into the offseason. You look at can the cornerbacks continue to develop? They kind of got shredded a little bit on Saturday. There's a lot of variables that go into play that I think it can't just be a run it back and you'll be better than you were this year scenario.
Dude, I love it. I love it. I feel like the whole what ifs and like we do it in sports all the time too, right? Like, and I do agree with you, Miles, that like we have this under an insane microscope of the Kirk conversation of, well, if he had a good defense, now he has a good defense. Well, if he had a good coordinator, well, now he has a good like he has a good head coach. You're always playing it. And at the end of the day, you know, yeah, the Vikings could be 11-4 right now. They also could be 4-11. You know, like they could be also be really bad by the end of the year. So the ifs and ands, I can't stand them at all. Any other Kirk thoughts? Otherwise, Forno, we can get to some JJ McCarthy film that you watched over the weekend.
The next quarterback, please. That's all I ask. Like, if you bring Kirk back, fine. Just please, I'm begging you, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi, just draft somebody early. Like, I also would love to see like a huge trade up. I just think it'd be so fun. And this franchise has never done it like that. They've drafted guys in the first round, but they never go like spend. And it's not about just like spending future capital to do it, but I love the aggression that teams do to like go get the guy that they really covet. I just would love to see that one day for my favorite team.
Heck yeah. Well, Forno, let's talk some JJ McCarthy here. So you watched some tape over the weekend, and I'm excited because we've seen his name on the board for a lot of mock drafts before. So I guess what did you like from JJ McCarthy? Is this a project quarterback? Is this a guy that starts day one? From what you watched, what were your kind of overall assessment of the Michigan quarterback?
So this is an interesting one, and I did give him a mid-second round grade, which is he's grade out a tiny bit higher than Will Levis, and I think when it comes to draft media, if he does declare, he's going to have a very similar range to what Will Levis did. Some are going to view him as a potential top 10 pick. Some are going to view him as a mid-day 2 guy or potentially even later. And while Levis had that massive arm, there were really a lot of questions on how he could use it because he wasn't consistent. He had an awful pressure to sack rate of about 28%, which you want to be somewhere around like 16%. Like one of around every 6 pressures you take a sack. Like that, like Cousins, I think is at about at 8%, which is really good. But when you look at some of those things, like it all matters in the encompassing evaluation. And the one thing that really worries me about McCarthy is I think staying at Michigan would be a massive mistake. I think he needs to come out and redshirt and really sit behind a guy and learn some of like nuances and grow as like a decision maker and grow as somebody who just learns the game and sees the field better versus or transfer and play in a completely wide open system. Because the one thing Michigan doesn't ask him to do a lot, and it's for good reason. The running game is incredible. They ran the ball 10 times again. They threw the ball 10 times against Penn State and won pretty easily. He doesn't have to throw the football in this offense. And when they do, it's a lot of play action, shot plays. The ones that the Vikings fans will know really well because they ran them under Gary Kubiak, where you're running 2 guys in the route concept, max protect, and just throw it up. Like, that's the kind of stuff Michigan is doing regularly. Now, he does show flashes being able to throw the ball in tight windows, making some progressions, but they don't ask him to do a lot. And I don't think it's because he can't. I think it's because they don't have to. And then because of that, they don't want to. They don't want to put him in position where he could potentially make a poor decision and make a bad play because they don't have to do that. They can go 13-0 based on the running game and throwing deep shots on play action. That's all they have to do. And I want to see him in a different offense where he can do some of those things and really grow. But McCarthy's not going to wow you with his arm strength. He's got a good arm. It's a Kirk tier arm where he can throw a deep ball. It kind of dies on him a little bit, and he doesn't have the best placement. Now, when you look at the PFF stats, it only tracks from 20 yards and beyond. He's second in the nation in completion percentage, but it's that 10 to 30 yard range where he's great, where he's able to zip it in, throw like those deep crossers, throw those corner routes, throw those dig routes. He's fantastic at that. It's when you're throwing it 40 plus, where his ball placement isn't great, and he throws it up short. And I'm not quite sure if it's a lot of it's to Roman Wilson, he's an absolute burner. Is he just misjudging how fast Wilson is being able to get to that point? Is he just laying it up a little too much? I don't really have those answers, but this is all part of the process. It's about trying to understand what the flaws are and how you can fix them. I think he may have a distance deficiency problem where, like, Russell Wilson throws that really big arc ball but it always gets there. I'm wondering if he just kind of has that, but it just doesn't. But that intermediate level, he's going to absolutely torch you, and he's got wheels. Yeah, he can throw the ball on the move. He can run around. He can make plays and gash you in the running game. It kind of reminds me of how Aaron Rodgers would approach the running game, where Rodgers was almost never going to have a designed run to him, but you give him an open field, he'll gash you for 20. That's kind of how McCarthy plays. He doesn't want to run the football, but he's more than capable and will torch you if he needs to. He also needs to avoid turnover-worthy plays in bunches. He had 10 of them last year. 7 of them came in 2 games. 4 of them came against Bowling Green in week 2. He just kind of got a little loosey-goosey. They won that game with ease, but he was just trying some things that almost felt like he was using that as a preseason game where he wanted to test how he could do certain things with certain route concepts because he was throwing bad interceptions. And because of how they built a lead so fast, I'm curious if that would have played into it. But I like McCarthy. He's not going to learn any more at Michigan than he already has. And I really think he needs to come out and sit for a year. Remember Dante Culpepper had the redshirt year in 1999? Do a redshirt year and then come out 2025. And I think you could have a really, really good quarterback. I don't think he'll ever be like a top 5. He's never going to have those kind of traits. And he doesn't have that Joe Burrow level moxie, which is just through the roof and kind of hides some of that arm talent deficiency, which Burrow's accurate. He does not have a strong arm, but he's able to make up for it with timing, anticipation, and just he's an all-time level moxie guy. And I think you could have a top 10 quarterback where he's going to be able to do a lot for you. And because of the wheels, he's going to add a different element that Kirk Cousins just doesn't have, where he can move around. But you don't want to necessarily craft a lot of plays where he's going to run or he's going to bootleg. You can do that and you can add that into your playbook. But it's not like, like every 5 plays I want him on the move. It's not like a Lamar Jackson construct where you want to always have him utilizing his legs in some form because he's so lethal with it. And Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, is MVP this year. So like there's the ability to do a lot of those things, but McCarthy's a pocket guy with wheels. And I think that archetype really fits the modern NFL well, especially because of how he attacks that intermediate level of the field. That's where you win Super Bowls.
So Miles, if it's a redshirt situation where he has to sit for a year, do you sign up for another Kirk Cousins contract? Like, who is because you can't really have the Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullens option if you're a redshirting JJ McCarthy, because people are going to have the pitchforks and torches ready to go on week 2 when you're 0-2 or the quarterback has a bad game. So if that's the plan, like if McCarthy is kind of viewed as a project, would that be the writing on the wall that if the Vikings, again, this is a lot of if ands, but if the Vikings were to take a project like that they would sign up for another year or 2 of Kirk Cousins? What would that look like in your mind?
I mean, I think that's the ideal scenario the Vikings want. I think they want Kirk Cousins in place with a young rookie quarterback behind him for at least a year. I think that's one of the reasons they haven't pulled the trigger on a rookie quarterback the last couple of years, but also why they haven't given Kirk an extension. I think they want that to line up perfectly for themselves, where they have a little bit of both, where they have more of the they have Kirk's contract where they have it understanding like the ins and outs of it and how to get out, but they also have somebody behind him that they can replace him with when the time comes. And I think McCarthy's that perfect archetype for that. I think JJ McCarthy, outside of like the obvious top guys, I think he fits this style of offense that Kevin O'Connell wants to run to a T. And then you add his maneuverability and ability to move with his legs. I think he would be a perfect fit for what Kevin O'Connell wants. And I like, at least from my perspective, I don't know if you'd have to redshirt for you to have a successful offense. Now, I think there'd be a cap on what the ceiling would be as a rookie, but I think because of how he plays the game, I think there's a way to get him in the game early as a rookie if you wanted to, if you didn't bring Kirk Cousins back, for example, and let him kind of be your day one starter and kind of trial by fire. It doesn't have to be that way, and I think there'd be no issues with sitting him, but I think because of the style of game he plays, I think he'd be the type of guy that you could maybe potentially play as a day one starter, again, with the bumps and bruises expected, but with all the weapons around him and the Kevin O'Connell experience, I think that could really help him. But like he's my ideal like non-top tier quarterback for the Vikings to go after this in this draft cycle if he comes out. And so I would love a JJ McCarthy on this team. I kind of liken him to, I think there's some Burrow-esque to his game. I don't think he's like Joe Burrow by any means, But I think like his ability to maneuver in the pocket when he's sensing pressure and his escapability and ability to throw on the run does remind me a little bit of Burrow. Now I don't think he's like the Joe Burrow like archetype as a like high level top 5 NFL player, kind of what Forno was saying. But I think there's some of that to his game that could really like get some high level play in that Kirk Cousins mold where you see hey, this guy could be a really, really good quarterback, but he needs to put it together consistently. And I think, coming that into the league, I think that's a really good like structure to build off of. And if you're Kevin O'Connell, I think that's the perfect type of quarterback to really mold into like a franchise quarterback.
I like it. Yeah, and Forno, I think you bring up a good point. If this guy's not going to be ready right away, redshirt him to a degree, let him sit for a year, let him learn all the system. Obviously, the Vikings will do all their homework on which guys are kind of the best fits for that. So I'm excited to see, kind of what this future holds for the Vikings. If they re-sign Kirk, if they still draft a quarterback, I think people will kind of look at it as black and white of they're going to re-sign Kirk or they're not going to draft a quarterback. Well, they could re-sign Kirk and still draft a quarterback, right? Like that. Both those options obviously are on the table. Do you guys want to get to this mock here? This is a pretty interesting mock. I'm really excited to bring this one to the table.
Let's do it.
Here at the sound too as well. All right, so this is from Pro Football Network. This is from AJ Schulte.
That's my boy.
You like him? Okay, you're tight with him. I like it. So this is a mock he did on Saturday. I'm not probably before the Saturday slate of games happened. A spoiler alert, the Vikings are picking 22nd in this mock in the first round, so that's where the Vikings are sitting. Some highlights here before we get to the Vikings pick. Caleb Williams goes 1 to the Bears. Drake May 2 to the Patriots. Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals at pick 3. Brock Bowers, the tight end, going to the Bears at pick 5 as well in this mock draft. So a lot of Bears movement here in this one, which would be very, very interesting. If they get a quarterback in this mock, they would get a tight end. All interesting stuff. I want to go all the way down to the Vikings. So the Vikings are on the clock at pick 22, and with their 22nd selection in the NFL draft, in this mock draft, they would take edge rusher Chop Robinson out of Penn State, who we've talked about a little bit. He writes up that with Danielle Hunter, Marcus Davenport, DJ Wanham, all slated to hit free agency, it's important the Vikings move to replenish this pass rush room. Minnesota nabs an explosive athlete in Chop Robinson. He says for Brian Flores to drop pressures. We'll see if Flores is still around as the DC going forward. But boys, when I look at the end of this draft, there are no quarterbacks off the board behind them. The next player off the board would be Brian Thomas Jr., a wide receiver out of LSU, to the Steelers at pick 23. But I think with that defensive edge room, kind of completely up in the air of who's going to come back or not. An edge does seem like a very logical option on day one, pick 1 for the Vikings in 2024.
Yeah, it does. And right now, Chop Robinson is sitting atop my edge rankings at number 1. He's ahead of Laiatu Latu, who I don't grade with medical concerns, just because I just grade what I see on film, and then you kind of take external factors and then maneuver that way. And then Jared Verse. I haven't got to Dallas Turner from Alabama yet, but Robinson, really, really explosive. Great first step. Needs to kind of improve just his overall bevy of pass rush moves, but just from 22 to 23, he showed a lot of growth in that area. And I just want to see him improve a lot of the finesse in his game as an athlete, and just a guy he's just built like a pass rusher, and he plays like it. Very explosive, understands how to use speed to power, understands how to use a multitude of pass rush moves, and continuing to develop the finesse, I think, is going to be the key for Chop Robinson to take it to the next level. I would love this pick. The idea of this pick is great. And I think we need to understand as Vikings fans, and when it comes to the quarterback position, if the guy's not there and you cannot physically trade up to go get one, then you have to readjust what your expectations are for the position. And you have to look at, how do I improve my football team? Because forcing a quarterback is how you got Christian Ponder. You don't want to ever force a position. You want to draft good players, and then you figure the rest out later. So Chop Robinson, I think, would be a really good value at 22. I personally think he'll go higher, but there's such a wealth of offensive tackle and wide receiver talent in this draft where you could get a guy like Chop at 22 and it feels somewhat realistic, even though in a normal year, a high-end pass rusher wouldn't be.
So with their second round selection, I'm going down here to pick 53. The Vikings back on the clock. They take Edgerrin Cooper, a linebacker out of Texas A&M. Now, a lot of the stuff that the author is writing about, he is saying it fits Brian Flores' defense. So he's assuming Flores is back here as the DC. Obviously, we'll wait and see on that. But he says Edgerrin Cooper has been a fast riser this season and has the length and athleticism to thrive in Brian Flores' defense. So in this situation, the Vikings' first 2 picks off the board, Miles, defense, going edge, linebacker. And I think linebacker is a sneaky one, too, that we don't really think about, right? Like, it's not the sexy position like an edge or like a wide receiver on offense, but that room is also kind of just completely up in the air. Like, Jordan Hicks has been great, but the dude almost lost his bleeping leg. Brian Asamoah hasn't been able to get on the field. It just seems like a linebacker, too, is probably, I got to imagine, high on their needs list, no matter who the DC is for the Vikings next year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we saw that Ivan Pace is here to stay. I think that guy's like, you just can't take him off the field at this point, and that's okay. That's a good thing, right? Like, but I do think that slows down the need to a degree. Maybe you bring back a Jordan Hicks next year. You do have Asamoah in the building, but he might not actually be a fit for what. Maybe he just doesn't fit what Flores wants to do because we haven't seen him play much. Otherwise, yeah, they do need another off-ball linebacker, but I think their ability to way that the Flores defense has played is they haven't really played many 2 linebacker sets. Like Josh Metellus has kind of been that pseudo second linebacker in a lot of those cases. And so I'd be curious if they really would value that position that highly. Now, I think that would be a good. I think Cooper's a good player, so like I'm not against like the player itself, but I do wonder if they could attack another position that would probably give them higher upside because of how good Pace has been and areas that they could really like focus on. And so I'm not against it. Obviously at this stage too of the offseason, or not even the offseason, but this stage in December. But I do wonder if they could find another position that could really like create another impact, because I'm not sure if that position would really is as necessary as we think it could be.
So I got 2 more picks here in round 4 that could spark a long discussion, and if we have to put a pin in it, we can, but this is juicy. So pick 117, the Vikings go with running back Audric Estime, I believe is how you pronounce it, right out of Notre Dame, the running back there. So they go with a running back at pick 117, and then 5 picks later, the Vikings are back on the clock because of the TJ Hawkinson trade, and again, we'll see what shakes out with trades and whatnot, but Forno, they would take quarterback Michael Pratt out of Tulane with pick 122. Just a classic, nice little day 3 quarterback selection, similar to Jaren Hall. Have you watched any Tulane football? Have you watched any Michael Pratt tape from a distance? What would you think about Michael Pratt as a quarterback option for the Vikings in the draft next year?
You haven't been watching Tulane football?
I have been watching Tulane
phenomenal
football.
to watch the last 2 years with Willie Fritz, and Fritz just went off to Houston, and that's one of the reasons why Pratt's in the draft. He didn't go back potentially to Tulane for his last season of eligibility, but Pratt is a gamer. He is a really talented player, throws an accurate football, does not have the strongest arm, but he's a very confident passer, and he's very poised in the pocket, can make plays with his feet. I think just because of the overall lack of traits, he's going to end up falling into this range, but I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL just views him a little higher because of some of that football IQ and intelligence and the ability to stay really poised in difficult situations. I would actually expect Pratt to go day 2. Whereas it's a little different for a guy like Spencer Rattler, who has every tool imaginable, but just hasn't been able to figure out how to use it and be consistent. Some of that had to do with his surroundings at South Carolina as he tried to rebuild his career after what happened at Oklahoma. But Pratt is a very talented player, and he's not going to wow you with this massive upside, but I think he could be a really, really capable NFL quarterback. And in a system like Kevin O'Connell's, where you're really focusing on the intermediate level of the field and anticipation and really firing with precision, I think Pratt could be a fit.
What about Audric Estime, the running back out of Notre Dame here? So obviously Ty Chandler's looked great, by the way, over the last few weeks. We probably missed the boat on maybe talking about how great he's been over the last few weeks here, and we'll get into it more on future episodes of Purple Daily on Draft. But what about another running back, Audric Estime there, if Alexander Madison they move on from, and clearly DeWayne McBride's like either not an NFL player, they obviously just do not trust him. He hasn't been elevated from the practice squad all year. He was kind of that darling that we projected on this show when Thor was here that he could be a fun little find, and he hasn't been able to crack the active roster. Audric Estime, Notre Dame running back, 5'11", about I don't have his weight in front of me here, but 227 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Does that pick do anything for you?
Well, I mean, he's a big bruiser, so there's a lot of that like Alexander Madison style to his game. I think he's got a little bit more like rock solidness to him than maybe Madison does, but I see a lot of similarities in that style and that build. He's good. I always think explosion should be the main point of drafting a running back. I think obviously, you need patience. You need you want them to have really good vision as well. But I think just like I want someone that's explosive, and I think that's why Ty Chandler has looked so good the last few weeks too, is he has that extra gear. The guys that are good within the first 10 yards, like that's great, I think. But like I like a home run hitter. So if you want to pair that guy with a Chandler, I think that's cool. But I think I prefer someone with a little bit more juice. But I don't hate that pick. But yeah, I'm not sure if I see it as much of a fit. But yeah, this run game has kind of gotten into a weird position because they finally started to hit their stride. They're finally finding some like sustained success, and I think they're kind of doing a little bit better with like how they're scheming up the run game, and guys seem to be bought in and kind of figuring it out this late in the season, which is really important down the stretch. But I'm just not sure if a bruiser kind of fits that model, especially if they like what Ty Chandler's been doing and moving forward.
Yeah, it'll be a really I'm intrigued on what they want to do at the draft next year because, there are some holes on this roster, and they're going to be picking in that sweet spot right between 22 and like 12. So very curious to see kind of where the Vikings end up picking. And, they're not out of the playoff race, so they could maybe even lose these few games, slide down some draft positions, but I don't see them losing all the next 3 games. It's going to be very highly contested against Lions, Packers, Lions, but going to be a really interesting, fun ride of the season here. Purple Daily on Draft, though, every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Appreciate everyone tuning in and hitting the subscribe button. We'll be back here. It's obviously Christmas next Monday. Stay tuned for future programming on Purple Daily on Draft. Might pre-record that later on in the week to bring you still something. So stick with us then. But this is Purple Daily on Draft. Miles, Tyler, Declan here. Hit the subscribe button. Daily Vikings Entertainment.